Hello, this is Faith at Faith and Books, and I'm going to do my Saturday wrap up instead of a Friday. Do they call it a wrap up or an update? Whatever. It's just what I'm reading and a review of a book I just finished. And I hope this comes out all right because I can't ever get the lighting right in this room. I'm just not good with lighting, I've decided. Anyway, this week I finished The Dead Secret by Wilkie Collins, and I didn't read it in this edition. I read it on my Kindle. I didn't really like the print in this book, so it was a waste of money, really. But I quite enjoyed the novel. It was, very Victorian, but an easy, light read. I thought comparatively light, considering the topic of the book. But I found it easy to read, and it had funny, quirky characters, almost like Dickens, and I enjoyed it. It was very Victorian. It had the doctor in there treating people. It always have a doctor, and it had a very Victorian type marriage going on between two young sweethearts, and it was good. It was interesting in that it was about a lower class. That the main character was a lower class person. Her name was Sarah Leeson, and she was a kind of like a lady's maid. And at the beginning of the novel, she is confronted with this terrible thing. She's already had something really traumatic happen to her because her hair is prematurely gray and she's very timid and frightened. And there's this terrible death scene, and she has to make this promise that's gonna, her life has already been really traumatized and it's gonna be further traumatized. So she really lives this life of great sorrow, and it's really, she's not stable. She's not, she can't cope with what's been dealt her. So it's kind of interesting in that regard that it was about this servant, someone from the servant class, and her psychology, what's going on with her because life's been so hard on her. So I thought that was an interesting angle and unusual. But it also had, even though that sounds like it should be heavy, it wasn't heavy. It had a lot of, brighter moments and quirky, funny characters, and the plot moved really quickly, and there's a lot to like about the novel. I sort of could see the secret coming, but they did have some suspenseful moments and kind of spooky moments. There was a secret that had to be unraveled at the end. It had a very satisfying Victorian ending that was, moral, had a moral. I enjoyed it. I really enjoyed it. I think I benefited by the fact that I haven't read Wilkie Collins in a while. I have read The Moonstone a couple of times over the years, and I've read The Lady in White, or The Woman in White. Yeah, The Woman in White, which I want to reread because I don't really remember it. I remember the setup, which is really good at the beginning when he meets the crazy woman. And then I know it's something about sisters, and there's one sister trying to help the other sister out. But I don't remember the details of the story, so I should reread that again. But since I hadn't read that recently, I think The Dead Secret is considered a lesser novel by Wilkie Collins, and I think people who might, be on a Wilkie Collins jag and they've read The Woman in White and The Moonstone, and then they pick up The Dead Secret and it's not as satisfying, I don't think. But since I haven't read those other books in a while, and I had no expectations whatsoever of this book, I had no idea what it was about. I just didn't. So I just picked it up and read it like it was a novel that that fell into my hands. And so I wasn't comparing it, so I enjoyed it. I didn't have any other frame of reference to judge it by. So I quite enjoyed it. I thought it was a good read, and I'd recommend it to anybody who felt like, frolicking in a Victorian landscape for a little while as a diversion. I thought it was good. So that's The Dead Secret. I'm still reading the brothers and I always say this wrong, is it Karamazov or Karamazov? But I don't know. But I'm reading this and oh my gosh, it's just such a whirlwind. It's just a roller coaster. So it's about a family, a father, this terrible father who just is awful. He's miserly, he's irresponsible, negligent to his sons. He doesn't care about anybody but himself. He just cares about his money and about his own pleasure. He drinks, he has orgies. He's just a gross person. And he's very perceptive of other people, so he's very good at manipulating other people and exploiting them, and he likes to yank people's chains on purpose. In a way, he kind of reminded me of Trump. But if you're pro-Trump, forgive me, but I always thought that Trump used his tweets just to set everybody off balance, and that was a way of sort of maintaining control. And that's what this guy does. He enjoys outraging other people because it gives him a handle on them, and he's very manipulative. And then he has these 3 sons that he sort of abandoned and who were raised by distant relatives, and there were 2 different wives. Both wives he sort of drove to the grave because he's such a horrible person. And the oldest one is named Dmitri, and he's the most like his father. He's sort of going to go down that path. He's not as bad about the orgies and that sort of stuff, but he could get there. And he drinks too much, and he's very emotional. But there's something honest about him. He still has some integrity, and I think he's gotten himself into a terrible situation where he's in debt and he's in love with the woman that his father is lusting after. And so he's in a terrible predicament. He doesn't know how to get out of it. And he hasn't, formed the character to be able to deal with it well. But there's something in him that's honest and does have integrity. So it's kind of even more tragic because he's kind of trapped. He's trapped himself. So that's Dmitri. And then there's the middle son is Ivan. And I know I'm only up to book 5, and I've just finished chapter 1. So we don't know much about Ivan. Now, I have heard this book before on audio 3 years ago, so I'm remembering some bits and not remembering a lot. But Ivan, we haven't been introduced quite so intimately to yet, and so he's kind of cold. He sees himself as a scholar. He tries to be, he's not as reactive. He tries to be more detached. He sort of plays around intellectually. He likes to play games intellectually. And he's in love with Dmitri's fiance, who Dmitri is cheating on with Grushenko. I don't think Grushenko has reciprocated, but he's fallen in love with Grushenko, so he's abandoning his fiance Katerina, and Ivan has fallen for Katerina, and I really don't like Katerina. I'm having problems with her. And then the 3rd son is Alyosha, or Alexei, and he's really sort of, I think, Dostoevsky's alter ego. He's young and innocent. He is enamored with the spiritual life. He's in a monastery. He thought he wanted to be a monk. He came under the mentorship of Father Zosima, who's this old, wise elder. And Father Zosima is on his deathbed now. And he's told Alyosha, or Alexei, that he shouldn't become a monk, that he should go out into the world and marry. And so, and Alyosha is kind of, he's known a widow and her daughter. He lodged with them, excuse me. He lodged with them when he was living in Moscow. They've all come back to the town of their birth, which I forget the name of the town, but that's where all this is taking place, just within a few short months. But anyway, and so there's sort of a romantic interest developing with the daughter of that widow that he had known before. So Alyosha is a lovely character. There's so much going on. There's also a 4th illegitimate son, Smerdyakov, and he's like a sociopath. There's other characters too. There's lots and lots of other characters. One thing I really like, though, is writing about all the women, all the different women. I mean, and this was about a woman too. I don't know, it's interesting because I guess right now, in our current times, we're always, and it's true, of course, that women were oppressed and all that stuff, but they still fascinated. They still had something going on. Their personalities and, they had influence, but not in the sort of worldly way that men did. Anyway, I just think it's fascinating reading about women and how they're presented in this literature back in the day when women didn't have the right to vote and all that sort of stuff, didn't have the independence that we have now. So anyway, I'm really, really enjoying this. I can't say how much I'm enjoying it. So that's that. And then I'm also reading, I'm continuing in my Bible. We are still in the middle of Exodus and Leviticus and reading through the Psalms. And I'm really, surprisingly, enjoying Leviticus, which usually, that's just lists of rules and they seem really bizarre and absurd and not comprehensible. But since I'm listening to it on a podcast while I'm reading, there's commentary by the priest who's doing the reading, and he sort of explains it as he goes along, so it makes a lot of sense. In Leviticus, there's 3 types of rules. There's the moral law, then there's the ritual law, for when you're doing a rite of sacrifice, and then there is the communal law, I think that's what he called it, which were laws that were meant to differentiate the Hebrews from the other pagan tribes around them, so that they would sort of, be a more cohesive group, that they understood where they stood in relation to these other tribes around them. So I thought that was really interesting. And once you have that lens to view all these rules through, you can sort of grasp it better. So I think from an anthropological or a sociological point of view, they're actually interesting to read. Also, to me, they really show that these were originally oral, because there's so much repetition. Like, they'll just repeat them. It's like, or I've read that there's different strands of authorship in the Old Testament. And they gave different names, Q, J. They're different, Judge. I forget now. There were 4 strands, like different ways of telling the story, and they often just squash them together, so there's repetition, because there might have been 2 different sources that they put together into one book. And that's why you have, like, say in Genesis, you have 2 accounts of the creation of man, and in Leviticus, a lot of times there'll be one set of rules, and then you'll go a couple of chapters later, and it'll be reiterated in another form. So I think that stems from them beginning as oral tradition, handed down until finally somebody wrote them down. And so that's kind of interesting to see too, and that makes it feel less redundant when you realize how it came to be. It wasn't like one person sat down and just decided to repeat himself over and over again. It's a compilation of different oral traditions, putting them all together, I guess, so not to leave anything out or something. And then I was going to talk about Lent is coming up Tuesday, and I already made my Tag Tuesday video, and I forgot to mention Mardi Gras. It will be Mardi Gras, and then which I never really celebrated, and then Lent starts on Ash Wednesday, and for Lent I'm going to attempt Fratelli, Tutti again, which is the latest encyclical by Pope Francis. I really like Pope Francis. He's not perfect, but I love his teachings. I really love his teachings. And so I tried to read it. I started reading it, and I got that far. But what I'm doing is I have a group on Facebook called Catholics for Zero Waste, and we're going to read this. So every day I'm going to post 8 to 9 sections of this encyclical, and then that should get us through Lent. And I'm not going to take a break on Sundays. Usually in Lent, when you're making a sacrifice, you don't have to make a sacrifice on Sundays because every Sunday is a little Easter. But this isn't a sacrifice, it's reading, church teaching. So I'm going to just post every day 8 or 9 chapters. And you can just go to the Vatican website, actually, and just look up the encyclical. If you want to read it, you don't have to buy it published. Because I underline and stuff, so I wanted a physical copy. I don't know if you can see them. But when I post it on Catholics for Zero Waste, I'm just going to go to the Vatican website, copy and paste, and then plug it in the Facebook group. And I'll just try to do that every morning. God willing, I'll be consistent and be able to do it through all of Lent. Anyway, that's the way I intend to get through Fratelli, Tutti. And I'm excited about reading this. I mean, I started it and I was really enjoying it, and then I got sidetracked. So for Lent, I'll do this. That'll be my religious reading. So I'll be doing that. And I'm going to continue with this all year. And I'm going to continue with this. And I started to read the book Kindred by Octavia Butler last night, and I think I'm already like 37% through. It's very easy to read. It's almost like written at a middle grade level, except it's talking about things that aren't middle grade material. But it's very, very simple. So I'm not sure what I think about it. I mean, the plot is really intriguing, but it's just plot. Like, it's just plot and dialogue. There's no... I think I'm going from this Victorian, love of language and description and nuance, and this too. I mean, this is just such a powerhouse. And then it was kind of culture shock to go to Kindred. So I don't know if I like it yet or not, even though I'm enjoying the plot. Anyway, so I'm in the middle of that, and I might finish it this weekend. It's such a simple book, but. Anyway, so that's that. That's all I've got, I think, right now. So that's my update. Was there anything else I wanted to say? I still haven't unhauled my little library books. I've got to do that. But the weather's been awful. We've been having snow and rain every day. And it's been really cold. Of course, not nearly as cold as it is in other places in the country. But for here, it's been cold. And it's been snowy and rainy. So I just haven't gotten out. I want to stand outside and, pull books in and out of a little library, get them all wet. So at some point, though, I'm going to unhaul them. So, all right, that's it for me. Take care. I hope you're doing well, and happy reading. Bye.